Hey, it's Craig. There's nothing I love more than scouring the bargain bins or the racks at a Big Lots, Family Dollar, gas station, or really anywhere else to find a cheap movie that I haven't heard of. As part of the Horror Not Fear campaign that will be ending in June of 2021, I'm doing this special segment where you can join me as I view these movies for the first time. So get ready to hear what I found off the rack. Hey, welcome to Off the Rack. So, since this is our first episode, we will be starting some new traditions, how we are going to move forward. Since it is dealing with cheap movies that I found, I will also have a glass of cheap beer and start off with a shot of cheap liquor. So, well, let's begin. Okay. That burns really bad. This first movie that I will be viewing for this episode is called Legacy of Evil, or The Possession of Michael D., which is a 1995 Canadian made-for-TV movie. Now, I found it for $2. It's a double feature that will also contain Dark Spirits, which I will get to in the next episode. But this is a movie that claims to be based off of true events and stars Stephen Lang, who is known for his credits in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the Fugitive TV series, the remake of Conan the Barbarian. But, you know, some people may know him from little picks like VFW, Tombstone, Don't Breathe, or a little thing called Avatar by James Cameron. So off IMDb, the synopsis reads, Michael and Jenny want to start to live together, but the presence of a dark force begins to destroy their happiness forever. Everything seems to focus on Michael, who has terrible nightmares. ... Legacy of Evil, or The Possession of Michael D., was directed by Michael Kennedy, who has a lot of Canadian television credits. The most important one for me is Kids in the Hall, the TV series. It was written by Ronald Parker. This was his first writing credit as far as IMDb says. But he went on to write Joan of Arc, the 1999 miniseries, and the Hatfield and McCoy's 2012 miniseries with Kevin Costner. So we open with this made-for-TV movie where Michael is walking through the snow. And of course, I love a good snow horror movie. But he ends up in this barn that's kind of run down. Things start shaking, the door shuts and locks, and a pitchfork is flung at him. And then he wakes up and you realize it was just a bad dream, which is kind of the reoccurring thing throughout. Even though not many nightmares happen, only a few, most of them are him going into trances during the day. But we'll get into that later. Now, first of all, I want to say that I actually enjoyed this a lot more than I really anticipated going in. Yes, it is very outdated, and that can be told by the score that's associated with it. It feels like an old school Lifetime movie that you would have seen. It harkens back to the made-for-TV movies that are associated with, Stephen King or others that happened throughout the late 80s and the 90s. Now, getting into the story itself, we find Michael, played by Stephen Lang, and Jenny, played by Sheila McCarthy, who it's been told they've known each other and been dating for roughly about 2 years. And they met on February 4th. This is brought up because that's when they choose their wedding date later on, in honor of Jenny's father, who's deceased. And then they get together, but she has 2 kids of her own, and it's revealed that he was also married previously, but it was only for a short stint, less than a year. But he seems like the nicest guy. When her kids want a puppy, he's the one that gets it for them.
See, your new friend wants to play outside.
What new friend? Oh, cute.
You be gentle now. Still just a peanut.
Yes.
When the kids are fighting and the mother, Jenny, disciplines them, he's the one that kind of backtracks and then does something really nice for them. And this becomes a thing that, it's brought up that he is too nice of a guy and that he needs to stand his ground a little bit more. So they decide, since they've moved into this new home and they're really making a life together, that they're going to get married on February 4th, because that's when they met. And everything seems to go smoothly, except the fact that he's having these horrible nightmares. They decide to just get married anyways, and one night they tell the children, who are also very excited, and instantly say they are glad that it's him, and they wish to call him Daddy right away. And he agrees. Everything's happy, but then things start shaking in the house. And the girls and everybody see a man standing in the window who quickly vanishes, and everybody witnesses this. It's not just Michael, it's not Jenny, it's not just the kids, it's everyone. And then the fire will burst up too. But then, at that same time, somehow, the greenhouse is caught on fire, and Michael runs out while it's raining, while there's snow on the ground, and he uses 2 fire extinguishers that do absolutely nothing. But it burns through the ground, and they don't know who did it, but they assume it's somebody because they definitely saw a man in the window. But the police officer then says about a neighbor who did it for the insurance money. So that's what he may be suspecting with Michael. After that, the two get married, and things seem to be going okay for a quick second, but then more things start happening. When the puppy comes up to Michael, he sees it and he's happy about it. Next thing you know, in the next scene, he is telling the children and the wife that the dog was hit on the road and he buried it. However, when Jenny goes outside, she finds a pitchfork covered in blood, and then a trail leading to a bigger pool of blood. And then it's assumed that she finds the dog, but we don't actually see it. We just see her face in horror. So after the dog, there's instances where they're driving home late one night, and Michael almost falls asleep at the wheel, but the car keeps driving by itself, speeding. Trees burst into flames, and even though his foot's off the gas, which Jenny can see, the car is still driving by itself. There's also an instant where her brother and sister-in-law come to take the kids and her away, and they see Michael in a trance walking down the stairs. And despite knowing that he's not been feeling well and been going to the doctor, they say, just, "Michael, don't you know it's cold outside?" And they just let him walk outside, despite knowing he's not mentally sound. Sure. But when they reach the top of the stairs, there's Michael sitting there. And they're freaked out, because obviously everybody just saw him walk down the stairs. And how is he up here? But he is. So Jenny decides to stay with Michael, as the kids are sent away, probably, so kids aren't harmed. And they don't have to pay the child actors, I guess. So they're sent away, and despite all of this, despite seeing things randomly burst into flames, all of the family is experiencing these hauntings. Everyone keeps trying to blame Michael. They just think he's crazy. And it's not like, oh, this is insane. We need to just... this is their scapegoat. No, they keep ragging on him on, how are you doing this? Which is kind of interesting, I guess, because he couldn't be doing what he's doing, but he could. Finally, After going to the hospital and seeing that there's nothing wrong with him on a medical level, they decide to go and see Dr. Nick Goller, played by Michael Riley, who is a paranormal psychiatrist. Even though this is what he focuses his career on, he's pretty skeptical about the whole paranormal world and just says he's only seen a handful of events that could actually be considered this. Normally, they're just based on psychology or something else. And he decides to help, but he's kind of leery until Michael starts showing possession, where his voice changes, his face almost morphs weirdly every once in a while in a quick flash, and he has a snake tongue and yellow eyes. And he tells Jenny to leave him, to get away. Now, this is going to be the recurring theme. This possession doesn't want to possess other people or do more harm to Michael. It just wants Michael to remain a bachelor. So, I guess this is probably the best possession for any male that wants to stay single. I don't know, maybe add in some ba-bum after that bit. It could be funny. I don't know. So he does this, and again, while Dr. Nick Goller is deciding to treat him, there's still other people that just keep thinking it's Michael's fault and that he's doing something. Even the police officer who thinks that Michael's doing this for the insurance brings him in, tries to interrogate him, sees the desk levitate with all of them on it, and then just says, "Get out." And again, it could be just Michael's fault. Who knows? I don't know. There's actually another scene too. Despite all the trees, despite seeing things levitating, there's a whole, right before they start believing maybe he's not just crazy, there's a whole scene where words start burning into his back. And as they're watching it, and they're taking it off, and everybody's witnessing it, so you see these words burnt into his back, and they're fresh wounds, and then the next scene is his wife, Jenny, coming upstairs and saying, "How did you do it?" Really irritated with him. What I liked about this too is there's one instance where they actually talk to a person of faith. Like, it's done at a very scientific case level, which was kind of cool and rare in this genre. It's played out in the format that you find with The Exorcism of Emily Rose, or a lot of those other ones that happened more recently that are said to be based on true events, where it feels like you're watching a dramatization of what happened, even though there isn't anybody actually being interviewed and describing it, but that's what it feels like. After all that, Dr. Nick Goller and his team of grad students that resemble something out of Poltergeist, they decide to monitor Michael. They find a little something here and there, he's acting strange, and then Nick Goller decides to bring in Dr. Hale, who is a psychiatrist played by Felicia Rashad, also known for her work on The Cosby Show. She's actually the top bill, I guess due to her name at the time, and it's interesting because she's barely in it. They make this big deal about her. She's brought on as the psychiatrist. She does this whole talk about, "Well, Michael, I can only help you if you acknowledge some of this is mental. It's not just supernatural." And he acknowledges it, and they have this moment together of strength and bonding, and she's going to be there for him and really make this work. And then she does a little bit of work on him, barely anything, to scratch the surface, and then just leaves. Then she's gone. And that's it. So she's kind of a horrible psychiatrist, I'd say, even though she's supposed to be the best in her field. So Nick Goller sticks around, and his coffee cup, because every time you see him, it feels like in a scene he always has a coffee cup that he's holding like this. And he's talking with his people, or he's telling his grad students where to go when he has the coffee cup. and never really drinks it. But the man likes his coffee because he has one every scene. There's also some weird sexual tension between Nick Goller and Jenny. They have a lot of moments together, and then when she goes over to Michael and holds him and shows him affection, it will do random shots to his face that seems like he's upset by that. So moving on. As we find out with this, Michael is being possessed by his father, who was possessed by a demon. Maybe he got from his father or something. Michael's tragic history was that his father was abusive, and abusive to his mother, and at one point Michael grabbed a pitchfork and held it at his father and said, "You leave her alone." And then the father then smacked Michael around, grabbed him, and threw him in a cage and told him to stay there until morning when he comes to get him. So what we start to see is that this demon doesn't want Michael to be with anybody or find love. Just as the same as when the demon was inside his father. That's why he was abusive to his mother, which eventually led to a murder-suicide. So they figure this out, that this demon, this father-demon transferal thing that goes from male to male, who knows, it could have been a whole lineage thing, that now it wants Michael for its own. But Jenny isn't going to let that happen. So she decides she's going to fight for Michael, and then they bring in another specialist who hypnotizes Michael. And this is where all of this information is figured out. And under hypnosis, Michael is able to talk to little Michael. Michael tells little Michael not to stay in that cage all night, but to come out of that cage. But he's the only one that can do it, little Michael. So as big Michael is walking away under this hypnosis, little Michael steps out of his cage, and the father comes down to confront little Michael. And little Michael just walks past him and goes outside, leaving his father behind. And then everything is happy. Michael is free. The family comes back at the right exact time for them all to embrace as one big happy family. I actually really like this. As much as I'm kind of joking around about it, and there are definitely some flaws, but I think it works, for what it is. It works surprisingly well, and I would watch it again. I don't know when. Probably not for a while, but I really would. I think it's a lot of fun. It's nice to see a very young Stephen Lang, who does a great job. I think, everybody in there works really well. I don't know. It's kind of your standard possession movie that during that time there may not have been as many, but with the boom that kind of happened in the 2000s, you're going to kind of see all of it. It's interesting to see a demon that isn't just trying to destroy the person's body, but that it just wants him to be alone, which is, I guess, interesting in its own right. But I would actually recommend, this is one that I'd probably say to come check out. Thank you for listening to Off the Rack. Make sure to follow us on our social media at Bloodhound Pix, that's Pix, or under the hashtag Horror Not Fear. And tell us about the movies that you happen to find in a bargain bin and took a chance on. Also, if you have any suggestions for cheap liquor or beer that I should try during these episodes, then send them my way. See you next time, Racketeers!
Bloodhound Pix podcast is produced by Josh Lee, Craig Dram, and Kyle Hintz. Music by Raymond Seed. Audio editing by Kyle Hintz.